Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. I think we might still have a few more people coming on, but we want to go ahead and be respectful of your time and get started on the webinar. So my name is Mary Foote. I'm the director of the Greater Arizona Development Authority. I'm joined today by Bill Davis, who's our financial advisor, and he'll be available for questions at the end of the webinar. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You'll notice that the chat feature is disabled, and the camera is disabled for anyone other than the hosts and panelists. And slides will be available. We will send them to everyone's email addresses. If somebody else is interested, we are going to go ahead and post the video on the website and have it up there for probably a couple weeks after today. Um, Questions, you will be able to ask questions using the feature available through Zoom. We will answer all of the questions after the presentation. Presentation should be about 20 minutes long, not trying to have anything too lengthy to allow a lot of time for Q&A and any other discussion that needs to be had. So I will do the presentation and then we'll get right into the Q&A. So thank you again, everyone, for joining today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm Mary Foote. I'm with the Greater Arizona Development Authority, and we're going to talk to you primarily about the financial assistance program that is offered through GADA, is how we refer to the acronym. But we'll also have a little information about technical assistance as well. So, want to first start just talking about GADA's mission. So, really, we were created to assist with public infrastructure projects and provide low-cost financing to help get those projects completed. So, when you think about GADA, you really think about us like a bank. Similar to the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. So, the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, or WIFA, some of you may be familiar with. You may have applied for loans through WIFA before. GADA is very similar. And in other states, we might be known as a bond bank, but essentially, we are a bank for public infrastructure projects. So, who does GADA serve? We have three main types. We serve political subdivisions, special districts, and Indian tribes. And you'll see there it's, as defined by GADA. So, in GADA statute, we're very clear about how we define these different types of entities. Political subdivisions are cities, counties, and towns. So, you may have heard of, community colleges being a political subdivision. For this purpose, it's cities, counties, and towns. Special districts. This full list is available in our statute. It's about 10 different types of special districts, but it covers things like transportation districts, jail districts, water districts, improvement districts. So we've got a broad scope of special districts that we are able to serve. And then also Indian tribes. So that has a little bit of a qualification, and we'll go into that further. But Indian tribes are eligible entities, and we are able to finance their projects as well. If you do not see one of the entities that you're interested in having a project, if they aren't included within the GADA statute, we can certainly work on what a partnership might look like, some kind of third-party agreement where maybe an eligible entity is actually making the loan, but they're doing a lease back to another entity. So there are lots of, different ways to think about how to get a project done and financed through GADA, even if it is not directly through the eligible entity. That's just something that requires a conversation. Always happy to talk that through. So GADA's history, we were created in 1997 under the Symington administration, initially with $20 million. That was to create a loan account and also to provide some technical assistance dollars to help folks get moving toward projects. And since that time, we've done almost $600 million in infrastructure across a lot of different projects across the state. We are looking to add to that this year. We'll have some additional numbers to report as we get through the next couple of months. So it primarily went dormant in 2014. But we have recently brought it back over the last year. So you might be asking, okay, why was it dormant? Why is it coming back? Well, GADA was able to maintain its funding. It is protected monies. And so the program was still able to operate. We're not sure if it was really just a low interest environment, but the current administration has really made it a priority to understand how to service public infrastructure projects, understanding how important they are to communities, and really how we can make sure that we're serving public infrastructure in communities that aren't in the metropolitan areas. So GADA is primarily focused on serving communities and districts outside of the greater Phoenix metro area and the Tucson metro area. So this is just an example of some of the past projects that were financed through the Greater Arizona Development Authority. Really wanted to give you an indication of the size of the projects. So um, there are some costs associated with borrowing, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But this is a program that is primarily for projects that are $1 million or more. We don't have much of a limit in terms of how much we're able to finance. It's really limited primarily by the borrower's ability to pay back the funds. It is also not a competitive program. So we go to the market to get the projects financed. So it is not as if it is a pool of money, and if we are financing one project, we're not going to be able to finance another project. So we're here to be able to serve communities across the state for large projects, medium-sized projects, and it is not a competitive process. Infrastructure that we do support. So we define infrastructure really broadly. So we do water, you can do land acquisition, facilities, buildings, roads, lights, anything like that can be financed as public infrastructure through GADA. Something to keep in mind is that sometimes some of the projects may also be funded by other entities, right? So it may be that you want to use GADA to finance a land acquisition, but you're doing it for a water project that you're going to be financing through WIFA. We can also partner with USDA, the EDA. So really thinking about your projects and where GATA financing might fit into them. We're happy to have that conversation with you. We're also happy to jump on any calls or conversations with other entities, state, federal, et cetera, to really talk about how to think about the stack of your capital and how GATA financing may fit into that. So how does GATA really work? As I mentioned, we operate much like a bank. So we are going to make loans to eligible entities for those public infrastructure projects. We're going to put those into a bond that's then issued through GATA out into the financial markets. Investors will purchase the bond and then the project is funded. There is a cost to issuing bonds. So some of you may be aware if you've ever issued your own bond uh, as a community, you're just coming to us for the bond. So we'll issue the bond. There are costs, but we will share those costs among applicants and we will pay half of that. We also have that loan loss fund that helps makes investors whole in case there are any missed payments. So really, we're making the loans, we're bundling them together, and then we're selling them to the market to get the funds. So kind of how that looks is eligible entities apply. We will have a GATA board approval. Also, keep in mind that we will need to have the governing body of whatever the entity is. So it may be a city council, town council, district governing body approve the ability to borrow as well. It'll go to underwriting. They're going to take a look at the underlying borrowers, but they're really going to take a look at GADA as a state entity, understand, really kind of how the bonds should be priced. We'll go to the market, we'll sell the loans, and then we receive all of the funding. Borrowing terms are typically 10, 20, or 30 years, so very similar to any other bond. However, if you need to make adjustments to the terms, maybe you need to think about your ability to refinance at a later date. There may be additional costs associated with that, but we can get creative in terms of the terms if you need to be more flexible with your borrowing time. So why do investors consider purchasing a GADA bond? Why is that attractive to them? Well, one is that loan loss account that I mentioned earlier. So again, in case of default, we do have the ability to pull from that fund to make investors whole, to make sure that we're getting those payments out to people. And that's really something that helps lower the cost of financing because we have that additional assurance. City and town borrowers, they do receive state shared revenue. Depending upon how we draft the documents, we may ask to have the ability for a state shared intercept. So in the case of a default, GADA would then have access to the state shared revenue to make the investors whole. Now, the important thing to consider with this is we will never take more money than what is owed to us. So as soon as the money is paid back, that intercept comes off. So if if Maryville is borrowing money for a library and we miss a payment, the state shared intercept may come into effect. But as soon as I make the payment, that state intercept comes off. We've also been working with our council. This is not something that should affect any future debt issuances. So if you're concerned at all about, okay, well, if they're able to do a state intercept, does that make a difference if I issue another bond next year or the year after? We can draft the documents, shouldn't have any effect. And again, as we work through the project, we're happy to answer any questions about this, but it is something that does have the ability to give an additional insurance to investors. And then tribal entities, as I mentioned earlier, are eligible for GADA financing. We do need to make sure that our Attorney General's office has access to any of that pledged revenue. So tribal nations are sovereign. So we do need to make sure that we have access in case of missed payments or anything like that. That again gives assurance to investors and helps us lower rates for borrowers. So maybe you're a city or a district or a tribal entity and you're thinking about applying for a GADA loan. Why is this something that you might want to consider? One is we do have technical assistance dollars available to help you prepare for financial assistance. So we just ended a current round. We may have another in the fall, so we'll keep you all posted on technical assistance dollars that become available. But the technical assistance money can pay for architectural drawings, it can pay for engineering plans, it can also help pay for financial advisory services if you're trying to understand how to put together a deal for a public infrastructure project, where the financing is going to come from. That's something that technical assistance dollars can help cover. So look for that as it becomes available in the future. And that is in the form of a no interest loan. So it's just something that we're putting out there that should be paid back eventually through a GADA loan with our financial assistance. Another benefit is that it does not require a public vote. So if Maryville wanted to fund a library and it was going to cost $10 million, and we wanted to issue a bond for that ourselves, one, we would have to pay more, right? Because nobody's helping to subsidize the costs. We would also have to go out for voter approval. But since we are the bond entity and you're just doing a loan through us, it does not require a public vote. So if I have, as of, the 2020 census, 48,000 population, I still don't have to go to a public vote. I can do the GADA loan and it just needs to go through my governing body for approval. So great benefit because there are also costs to that as well. Money is upfront, so we are not doing drawdowns of the funding. When we go to the market and we get the funds, it's all upfront money. We don't ask for reimbursement filings. There isn't anything like that. So you're really able to get the money and spend it right away. This is also not federal money. As I mentioned, we do go to the private markets. So it is private money that we are getting on behalf of the borrowers. So there are not rules like Buy America, Build America or Davis Bacon. We're not going to have rules that may change kind of midway through the loan. So during these times, something to consider whether or not it's wise to have a portion of your borrowing be non-federal money. And that's something that we can help provide. What's another benefit? We're going to do all the filings. So there is administration and there are requirements associated with having a bond issuance. We're going to go ahead and take care of that. So just another thing that you don't have to think about other than making your payments and getting your project done. GADA is going to do that on behalf of the borrower. Also, cost of issuance, half of that is covered by the Greater Arizona Development Authority. So issuing bonds can be pricey. We're going to pay for up to half of that. The remaining 50% is going to be split among the borrowers that are in the bond. So anybody else who may have borrowed during that round will pay a proportional amount. And then it'll be rolled up into your borrowing costs. So if I do a loan for $1 million and I have borrowing costs of, let's say, $50,000, it's just going to go into my total loan payment will be $1 million, $1,050,000. So not something you have to pay up front. It can be rolled into the total loan. And then we're also going to help subsidize that cost through GADA and through just being able to share some of those costs among other borrowers. So really great benefit for those of you who know how expensive it is to issue a bond yourself. Definitely want to avoid that as much as possible. We currently have a AA plus bond rating, so really strong bond rating. So we're going to get kind of lower interest rates there. You can check the market always and see what are the bond, what are the interest rates right now for, let's say, 10, 20, 30-year AA bonds, muni bonds. That's going to give you a good indication of where the interest rates might fall. As I mentioned, we have Bill our financial advisor available to answer some questions about what we're seeing the market doing at this moment. But in addition to having a AA bond rating, we have that loan loss fund that will make investors whole if anyone misses payments. That again kind of helps lower the interest rates. So that way you're not having to spend as much money for interest when you're borrowing. So you have realized you're an eligible entity, you understand what the benefits are, you have a project, you're excited, you're ready to go, you want to apply for GADA financing. So what are some of the things that you need to know before you go into it? You want to know what the scope of your project is. So how big of a project is it? What are the things that are involved? What are the costs associated with it? And what is the timing? When are you going to get started? When are you going to be shovel ready? What does that construction timeline look like? Because this is a tax exempt bond issuance, which is great. That's what helps get you a low interest rate, but it does, require us to make sure we're not over lending, right? So if you are borrowing, you want to make sure it is covering, all public infrastructure in such a way that you can use those monies if something comes up and you're a little bit under. We want to make sure we're not over lending and the money that we are lending to communities is going to publicly owned infrastructure projects. We also don't want to underlend, right? So we really want to make sure that you are getting through your project and you're not going to have a funding deficit, right? We want to make sure that you know the scope, you know the timing, so that you are getting the funds that you need. Additional kind of thing to think about in terms of tax exempt financing is that we need those funds to be spent within 3 years. We don't want to get to the 3 year mark and have had only 25% of the money go out because that could affect the tax exempt status. And that's not something that we want to have. So again, kind of going up to that first bullet point, the scope and timing is really important to understand. So when you actually do the application, you're going to see us ask questions related to that. What is your project timeline? What are the costs associated with your project? Do you have bids? Have you gone out for bids? Those are things to consider, or can you do that in a short period of time so that we know what those amounts are and the timing is before we go to underwriting? We're also going to want to know how you're going to pay for it, right? I mean, if you want to borrow $10 million over 30 years, we want to know how you're going to make those payments on a regular basis. So that's important for us to know. We also want to know that you've looked at all kinds of financing. You don't have to finance a project with, part of your own funds or through another entity as well. There isn't like a cost match or any kind of requirement. We just want to know that you've done your due diligence on the financing options that are available to you. We want you to use GADA financing, but we also want to make sure that you're getting the best deal possible for your project, and we want to make sure that you've done that work. We also, as I mentioned, need that debt resolution. So we're going to need your governing body to sign off on your ability to borrow the funds. That can come after the application date. Don't feel like that's something that you need to get before you apply. The most important thing is to get the application in. The rules associated with our statute are very clear. We have to have the applications in. They don't have to be totally complete. We can work with you on them. We can get the resolution later, but we need to have them in. So what's the timeline right now for the financial assistance? So we opened a round up in March, on March 15th. We have 60-day rounds. So we have 60 days in which to make an application. We also had our technical assistance application due that day. So May 15th, as I mentioned, really important to get the application in. Then we're going to spend a couple of months going through, looking at all the information, and we're going to then go for board approval. After we go through board approval, then we're going to go through underwriting and issuing the GADA bond. As we were shown before, then once we get all of those fundings, we give them right to the borrowers. So that's the information I had for you. We're going to go into the Q&A section. I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that we will have these slides available. They will be sent to everyone who registered. We will also post them on the website for a period of 2 weeks. You can reach out to my information there. We'll also put my email information in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing and take a look at the questions now. Okay. So I see from Mary Dahl, who I think is from Santa Cruz, asked, we get congressional designated funding for a small portion of our project. Do you know if this means the GATA money has to comply with BABA, NEPA, et cetera? So whatever portion you are getting from congressional designated funding, you will have to follow the rules associated with that funding. Any money you get from GATA, you do not have to follow any rules other than those that are associated with GATA, which means it has to be for public infrastructure, for publicly owned infrastructure, and we need to have the funds spent within 3 years. Any other funds you get, you need to make sure that you're tracing that money to any rules associated with it. Okay, Ed Mears. So Ed Mears asks, is the funding cycle a 60-day period? Is it only once a year? It is not only once a year. We have 2 different funding periods. Our next application due date for financial assistance will be November 15th. That will open up on September 15th. So again, that 60-day period, it'll open up again on September 15th, and you'll have 60 days to apply. I recommend reaching out to me if you're considering, and we're happy to kind of talk through what that project might look like and get you ready in time for the application. Okay. Another question from the city of South Tucson. Small urban city completely surrounded by the city of Tucson. Population is 4,600. So The population of 4,600, regardless of whether you are surrounded by an urban community, you would be eligible. We look at the borrower's population, not necessarily what they're surrounded by. Obviously, most of the folks who are going to be applying that are within that population threshold of 50,000 are going to be in areas outside of metro areas, but we do have some that are close to metro areas. So as long as you're not technically Tucson, and you have a 4,600 population, you are your own public subdivision, you would be eligible to apply. Okay, I have another question I see in the chat. What is the process with earned income from interest on funds that are not quickly consumed? I am going to hand that one over to Bill, our financial advisor. Bill, is that a question you understand, or do you need clarification?
I may need clarification, but if I understand the question, as Mary mentioned, the proceeds from the GADA bonds, or which become the loan proceeds for the borrowing community, are received at closing 100%. So during that period of time, during construction, you're going to earn interest on those dollars. Um, those dollars can be used to pay interest on the GADA loan, or in many cases can be used for construction purposes. As Mary mentioned, they are tax exempt proceeds. So federal laws apply relative to spend down, as she indicated. And so in some circumstances, you might be in a position to have to rebate any positive arbitrage earnings back to the US Treasury. So hopefully that answered your question.
And as we will always say on every call, please consult your tax advisor. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Bill, is there anything else that you wanted to mention while we have the time?
No, I mean, I think the presentation is very thorough, and I'll put a plug in for GADA. I think there are some great opportunities here for many communities. The cost savings can be significant, not only on the cost of issuance, but on the overall interest expense. So it's something to take a very serious look at. The one clarification I think is that state law does require, if it's a general obligation pledge, all communities have to have voter approval for a GO bond. But any other revenue pledge besides property taxes, as Mary mentioned, would not require a bond election. So also a very, potentially cost-saving feature for GADA.
Thank you, Bill. Well, I don't see any other questions. I know my email information was placed into the chat. While we have this webinar today, we are here and available for any questions you might have, or if you take this information back to your communities, we're happy to have any follow-up conversations. Also, we're happy to work with you on your application. So if it's something you're not really sure where to start or how to work through it, that's why we're here. So happy to help with anything like that. And if we don't know the answer, we will make sure to get you an answer so that you feel comfortable with moving forward. I want to thank everybody for attending today. As I mentioned, we will be sending a copy of the presentation today to everyone who registered. We will also have that listed on our website, and you can always visit gada.az.gov for additional information. We'll be updating periodically there with all of the relevant information. So thank you so much for attending today, and hope to hear from you.